as you may have seen on your schedule, we have 45 minutes allotted for this session, and we will keep to that time frame just to make sure that the conference is staying on schedule. If we have time at the end, we will open it up for a short Q&A, but that would just depend on if we have some extra time at the end. Before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer. If you've been to our education events, this will be familiar. But the information that's discussed during this session is not medical advice, nor is it intended to be a replacement for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We always encourage individuals, if you have questions about your personal health circumstances, you always want to reach out to your physician or another qualified health provider. Additionally, IDF hosts many education events throughout the year, including our conference, but we always like to highlight that the views and opinions expressed by guest speakers do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of IDF. So just a quick disclaimer before we dive in here. And with that, I will introduce Dr. Theo Heller. He is a Chief of Translational Hepatology at the National Institutes of Health. He focuses on hepatology that impacts individuals with inborn errors of immunity. So he's going to discuss some information about hepatology, and with that, I will bring you up here. Dr. Heller, thank you so much.
I'm really grateful to be here. It's very inspiring to see so many people so motivated, so passionate about making life better. And it's kind of humbling. It's very humbling. I'm a little bit upset with the organizers because initially they told me I could take 3 hours to speak about the molecular biology of the liver. And then last night they gave me a different topic. So I'm going to try my best to talk about other things. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Megan. Thank you. And really, when I say I'm grateful to be here, I'm not just saying it sort of a standard way. I stood in the dining room this morning watching everyone eating breakfast, and I saw how excited people were, and I saw how much it meant to be here. And I thought, that is so inspiring. I need to take that home. So we're going to talk about that life really does deliver of it. I have no commercial interests. I'm your tax dollars. I am obsessed with 2 things, coffee and liver disease, and we had lots of coffee this morning. And I'm not going to speak about specifics. I'm going to keep it very broad. If you want specifics, if you want to sort of get into the weeds, a good starting place is this review we wrote, which came out 2 years ago. One of the first questions that Megan asked me, different Megan, not the same one, yes, is when should I see a hepatologist? And so my first question is, what's that? Well, a hepatologist is a doctor that takes care of diseases of the liver. And what's the difference between a gastroenterologist and a hepatologist? Well, the training for both systems go together. The liver is considered part of the gastrointestinal tract, but the liver is kind of special. So the liver has additional training, and most people do at least 1 year extra training. GI, or gastroenterology, deals with that picture there, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the esophagus. The liver is different, and the liver is situated next to the stomach, above the colon. And what we're going to focus on today is the liver. So when should you see one? Sooner rather than later, because there are things we can do. We can't cure. Cure is a 4-letter word in hepatology. We don't like to use it, but we can really help. Help is a 4-letter word that we like to use. And most times when people present, it's elevated liver enzymes. And I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about so much more. But before we get into the weeds, not in terms of disease, but in terms of the liver, I wanted to take some of my experience with patients, and I wanted to tell you what I typically hear. This is the problem. Patients come to me, and to other doctors too, not just me, I shouldn't say me, typically come in. I get the sense that they feel alone and overwhelmed. They feel not understood. And every patient says to me, they have been told so many times, you're the first patient I've seen with, and you can fill in whichever disease you like. And I hear this over and over, and then you add in the time. You know how much time you probably don't know how much time it takes to go see a doctor? None of you probably understand. You have to drive there, you have to get there, and then they keep you waiting. And then you have to come back because the blood tests weren't something, I don't know. There's always so much time. And then the cost. Right, so it's not easy. And then let's talk about something else that I've heard and felt so many times, uncertainty. So if you come to me and you say to me, I have X disease, what's going to happen to me? I don't know. How long will it take for me to die? I don't know. Will I live? I don't know. I can tell you about what will happen to 100 people, 1,000 people, but you as an individual is impossible. Statistics don't apply to individuals. And the patient sitting in front of me is an individual. So I'm going to talk about an antidote to uncertainty. But before I do, I want to talk about one more thing. So I don't know if you've ever read the introduction to the CIA Handbook on Torture. None of you? Raise your hand if you have. One person. So it's not what happens how we torture people, it's what happens if you're captured. And it's not in the public domain, but the introduction is. It was published in the Washington Post 15 years ago. And in that, they say that the purpose of torture is to make you uncertain about the things you care about most, so that you don't care anymore. So let's think, you have a disease that affects your child, your parent, yourself, your spouse. What do you care about more? And then you come to me and I say, I don't know to every question you ask. That's torture. So I understand that uncertainty, and we have to acknowledge it before we talk about other things. So I'm going to spend some time giving you an antidote to that and telling you how to manage that. So, to change the mood, there's little to be afraid of. I really do know that bad things happen to good people. I don't know why. You can ask the dermatologist that. He can answer that. But I definitely don't. Most things, though, can be dealt with by using first principles. And if I'm going to tell you something that if you say that I said this, I'm going to deny it. Okay? But in some ways, the liver is a pretty dumb organ. So if don't laugh, it's a secret. So if I say to you, your shoes are nice, you can have a comment about where you bought it. Something happened. If I say to you, that's a nice watch, you can say to me something about the watch. It keeps good time. We have the ability to respond in different ways. The liver only has a number of limited ways it can respond to insults. So if we understand that, we can manage and work up pretty much everything in the liver. So it doesn't matter how rare the disease is, because the responses are pretty much all the same. That's why I'm a liver doctor. It's simple. The ostrich that puts its head into the sand will still be eaten by the lion. So we don't want to avoid it. We don't want to run away. Better to preempt than catch up. So this is what we're going to go through. What's the liver, or why should you love it? What does it do? What can go wrong? And what can we do about it? All around the world in 25 minutes. The textbook's like that thick. So liver is important. It's the largest organ in your body, second to the skin. See, I did put it in the slide. He's the dermatologist there. It's 1.5% of your body weight. It nestles below the diaphragm. It's also protected by the ribs. We think the ribs protect the heart and the lungs. Not true. It protects the liver. And all of the intestinal and splenic blood goes through it. And only then to the heart. And that's going to be very important. Hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to it twice. So what does it do? Lots and lots. It has to make its bed, take out the trash, do the homework. Lots of things the liver has to do. Chores. It makes things, proteins, clotting factors, fats, glucose. The glucose that's keeping your brain working right now, while you're trying not to sleep during my talk, came from your liver. It stores things. It breaks things down, toxins, drugs. The medicines you take, the reasons that they clear your body, mostly is your liver. Stores things, vitamins, repackages things. It's like FedEx. It repackages things in Cincinnati and ships it out again. Think about how cholesterol is shunted around the body. It cleans things up. It really does. And it doesn't ask for much. And it protects you from all the junk that we eat. Right? The liver cleans it up before it gets anywhere else. Filters. So lots of functions. What can go wrong? Lots. And let's think about it. This is what I mean about 4 principles. The 4 horsemen of liver disease. You've heard of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? The 4 horsemen of liver disease. There's a trigger, there's a cause, there's something that starts it. We can't always do something about that. There's inflammation, which almost always leads to fibrosis, scarring. And the scarring in the liver can occur in two places. One is the liver itself, and the second is the bile ducts. And often, people forget about the bile ducts. And that's particularly important in people with PI. And the last thing that happens is you destroy the architecture. Most people think about cirrhosis, and cirrhosis is the commonest way we do that. But there are other ways to do that too. And there are two things that can go wrong. One is dysfunction, doesn't make the bed, doesn't take out the trash, all those things, remember? And the second thing is it doesn't let the blood flow through it. Doesn't let the traffic. You saw the traffic coming from the airport to the hotel. It's worse than that. It's worse than that. It doesn't let the blood flow through the liver. And when the blood can't come through the liver, you get what's called portal hypertension. Let's talk about the trigger and the cause, or PI and my liver. So there are two things. A patient with PI, a person with PI, can get anything any other human can get. And that's important because sometimes we have what's called anchor bias. We see the patient in front of us and we say, oh, you have a PI, so it's only things that someone with PI can get. My favorite recent example last month was someone with PI who was feeling unwell, had very high fevers, was taking Tylenol continuously, not eating, and they damaged their liver, not because they wanted to, but by taking Tylenol. And everyone was thinking about weird things that might happen in PI, but it was just Tylenol. So don't forget. And then, of course, there are things that are more likely in the context of PI. And here, liver expertise matters for the liver. So having someone who understands liver disease, who knows about liver disease, who can think about it in the context of PI, will understand the road less traveled and the things that are less common and the presentations that are a little bit different. Pattern recognition, early diagnosis makes a difference. And Hickam was a fantastic he was a physician in the South, and I always remember his dictum. In medicine, we try and simplify Occam's razor. It's usually one diagnosis. How can we be parsimonious? But Hickam said, patients can have as many diseases as they darn well please. And that's important in PI. Patients often have multiple diseases. So we can't forget that. Let's talk about inflammation. So we spoke about what the liver does, right? What it is, what it does, and now we're talking about inflammation. We're on our third horseman. Everyone worries about liver enzymes, and they are the mood the liver is in. You see, I didn't call them liver function tests. They are a reflection of inflammation or the mood that the liver is in at the time that you measure it. And when they go down, it doesn't mean that the function's better, and when they go up, it doesn't mean the function's worse. So my wife, when I told this to my wife once, she said to me, that's like you. So I said, explain. So she said, you could be in a fantastic mood, and I tell you to take out the trash, and you don't. Right? The liver enzymes can be normal, but the liver's not functioning. Or you can be in a foul mood, and I tell you to take out the trash, and you do. The enzymes can be high, bad mood, but it's functioning. So it's important to understand that disconnect and not get worried when your enzymes are high. Of course, if they're in the thousands, that's a problem. But for most elevations, it's not a reflection of mood. The longer you're in the bad mood, the worse your function will be. It's true. So don't get panicked. Let's talk about scarring. I already mentioned two places. One is the liver and one is in the bile ducts. And this picture is taken from the review. It's hard to appreciate, but those bile ducts are not normal. They don't look smooth. They're very scarred, but the liver is actually okay in that patient. That's a patient with DOC8. So it's important to think about both. Let's talk about architecture destruction. Function and pressure in cirrhosis. It's both the function and the flow through it. Portosinusoidal vascular disease is a new term. It's a new word, just came up in the, one of the reasons doctors have meetings is that we can come up with new words so that we can appear smart and have to give talks to people like you every other year. So portosinusoidal vascular disease is something that means that the small vessels in the liver or the architecture of the liver gets damaged in a way without scarring, without fibrosis. And this we also call non-cirrhotic portal hypertension. It's often silent, but silent does not equate to safe, and I'm going to come back to that. There are also other things, but this concept of non-cirrhotic portal hypertension is very important because doctors normally say, oh, your albumin's fine, your bilirubin's fine, your PT is fine, or your INR, your liver's working fine, you don't have liver damage, I don't care that your enzymes are elevated. Oh, but actually, you have non-cirrhotic portal hypertension, you have nodular regenerative hyperplasia, you have obliterative portal venopathy, something else, which is as significant as cirrhosis. So this silent, in terms of function being normal, is something that is often understood. And this is more common in PI. So if you leave today with one idea, and if, for those of you who are awake, it's that it's not cirrhosis, that the diseases you need to be worried about are a little bit different, and that's why you need expertise. And this is an example of one of our patients. I don't have a pointer, but the liver looks normal on that's the right, or your left, right. The liver looks normal, and most pathologists who are good would read that as normal. But on the other side, that's a special stain called a reticulin stain, which is not typically done, which would not routinely be covered by insurance unless it's specifically requested. And if you look, you can see that some of the cells are really fat and some of the cells are really thin. They're working fine. They're all working fine. But the problem is it's like the traffic, stop and go, stop and go. The blood can't flow through that. And those patients get incredibly high blood pressures in their liver, which lead to what we're going to talk about in a minute. So that is very subtle, very easy to miss, and what makes me look smart, because patients come to me, we just say, do the reticulin stain, and then we make the diagnosis that no one else has made, and they say, oh, you're fantastic. No, one-trick pony. So cirrhosis, we already spoke about function. Chores go away. No bed made, no trash taken out. Let's talk about the pressure. Liver has its own blood pressure. If it's high, it's called portal hypertension. Many reasons for the pressure to become elevated. We already said cirrhosis is the commonest, and all the others, and I'm repeating these terms because I want you to leave with them, non-cirrhotic portal hypertension. So the next part of the talk is not going to apply to most of you. The next part of the talk is not common, but it's like insurance. It's so important, and this is the life-threatening part, that I want to spend a few minutes talking about it. Not because it applies to most people in the room. Up to now, applies to almost everyone. But this is like insurance. You don't plan on the car accident, but if it happens, you want to have insurance. So here you want to know about this, not because it's likely, it's unlikely. Okay? So the classic complications of portal hypertension are varices, we're going to talk more about that, a big spleen called splenomegaly, ascites, which is fluid in the abdomen. We're not going to talk about that because that's less common. And encephalopathy, or clouded thinking, kind of like a delirium. But we're not going to talk about that because that's also less common. So varices are dilated veins, and I'm going to show you a picture. They occur in the esophagus, in the stomach, in the rectum, and also in some other places. And they tend to bleed. And if you're not sure, I can tell you with certainty that's not a good thing. It's bad. Bleeding is bad. Okay? So how do varices form and why do they form? You have the gut at the bottom. That's the spleen. That's the portal vein. And that's the splenic vein draining into the portal vein. You see where the splenic vein joins the blood coming from the gut? That bigger part where the arrowhead is called the portal vein. Now we're going to talk about the most important organ in the body. Oh, did I say that, Jack? The most important organ in the body. The liver. And above the liver, blood flows out of the liver, we already said this, to the heart. And for those of you who didn't go to medical school, that's what the heart looks like. And what happens? There's a blockage in the liver. The blockage can be elsewhere too, but we're talking about liver disease. So there's a blockage in the liver. And this is plumbing 101. Pressure backs up. It backs up. The spleen gets big, and that's why the platelets drop. The spleen's job is to recycle platelets. And all those little people sitting on chairs at desks in the spleen, like government workers, busy recycling platelets, they don't know that now there are 50 of us when before there were only 5. So they each do their quota of 10 platelets a day. So when the spleen gets bigger, platelets drop because you have all these little elves sitting in there doing their jobs, not understanding that now they could slack off. With me so far? Okay. And then blood has to get back to the heart. It has to. So you form new vessels from the gut and the spleen to the heart, which bypass or circumvent the liver. Yesterday, my Uber driver did that. He went off the highway, took a loop around, and then he rejoined the highway. I thought, this is like a varix. See, I told you, it's an obsession. I should be medicated. So that's what varices are. And this is what they look like. This is a picture of a patient with a PI, and this is their varices. You can see 4 of these big dilated veins, the biggest one on this side, closest to me. And if seen and if managed and if dealt with, more than 95% of people are going to be fine. So that's why I'm talking to you about it. I'm not talking to you out of fear, and I'm talking to the couple of percent of you, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of you who are going to have a problem with varices. Don't be scared. Just want to know about it ahead of time so you can manage them. We've got very good ways of dealing with this. What about the spleen? Spleens become big, they can rupture. So people who play basketball, who go skiing, things like that. Some people use spleen guards. Platelets drop. That's usually a focus. People become obsessed with that. Really obsessed with that. But usually clinically it doesn't matter so much. If platelets are 90, 100, it's okay. You can have surgery with that. It's not a problem. We like that because it tells us what's going on in the liver. And white cells can drop, which is a problem, which I'm not going to discuss, but we can discuss if you want. So why not take out the spleen? The answer is no. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Well, sometimes yes, but not in liver disease. In liver disease, we have other ways of dealing with the spleen. The spleen is a victim. Dr. Saul Carpin, who's was head of pediatrics at Emory, who recently left, this is one of his favorite phrases. You need the spleen. Immunologically, it's important. It's a pressure sump. So after a big meal, when all that blood is coming back to the liver, 30–40% increase in flow, and the pressure backs up, the only place it can go is for the spleen to get bigger. It's soft. So some patients who have liver disease will tell me after a Thanksgiving meal, they'll have pain on the left side. That's because their spleen is stretching. It's taking up the pressure. And low platelets in the... So this is one of my favorite things I learned at medical school. We often get distracted by things that make noise but don't matter, right? The platelets are not going to kill you. The liver will. We get worried about the platelets. We take out the spleen. The liver disease is still there. It's not gone away. You've done nothing about it. So, and more than that, as a liver doctor, I need your platelets because as they drop, it tells me how fast your disease is progressing or if it's stable or if it's not. So you've taken away remember, the function tests don't change. So the only thing I have that I can really non-invasively measure that tells me how your disease is progressing are the platelets and the spleen size. I don't want it out for selfish reasons, besides the other two. There's also some evidence that liver disease might progress more rapidly if you take out the spleen, but that's not fact yet. So what can we do about it? First thing is understand it. And as someone who does research, I want to give a plug and thank you to those of you who participated in studies and who come because it helps us understand things for everyone else. And it helps us make it better for everyone else. And research matters to me because then I can make it better for my patient. I don't care what you do in a mouse. It's a good time to be a mouse. You can cure cirrhosis, you can cure cancer, but I don't deal with mice. So there's not a perfect one test that you can do for liver disease. Often we rely on combinations of tests, and we have to look at the numbers, and we have to look at the trends over time, and we have to put it together. Liver biopsy is incredibly important, really important. Liver biopsy makes such a difference for patients with PI or inborn errors of immunity because the liver disease is often different. We've moved away from liver biopsies in general for hepatitis C, for hepatitis B, for MASLD. We're starting to move away. That's fatty liver. But for some diseases, we really depend on it. And this is one of those cases. We don't have to do lots of liver biopsies, but at least one. Liver involvement may be more common than we think. But the good news is that in my experience, it's generally mild. For most people, it's there, but it doesn't progress. But to really be able to say that to you with certainty, to use that word, we'll need time to do the studies. So here's my approach to the antidote to uncertainty. You know, the things that you can't control, we have to make peace with them. That's the struggle we all have, right? How do you make peace with the uncertainty? But one of the ways I've learned from my patients, from people like you, is that you do what you can and you accept that that's what you can do right now. So you see your doctor regularly, you get your blood tests, you get the liver enzymes measured, the platelets measured, the liver function tests measured. You get imaging. I can't tell you how important imaging is. A good MRI or a good CAT scan, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It really makes a big difference. And so the screening is what you do initially the first time you come to the doctor. And we may do some extra tests to make sure you don't have hepatitis C or hepatitis B or all the other more common liver diseases because common things occur commonly. And then we move into what we call monitoring phase. So those people who look like they have no evidence of liver disease, we say, call me if you need me, but need me if you call me. Those people who look like they have some evidence, we say come back in a year or two. And those people who have liver disease depends on the severity, but we bring them back regularly. And those people get regular labs, regular imaging, and the frequency depends on severity. And if you notice, I'm being careful not to tell you what specifically, because I don't want you to go to your doctor and say, he said this or that. And for different people, it will be different. Different liver diseases are different. So I want to keep it broad so that it's true for all of you, but for your individual case, it will be very different. And this is so important. Even although we can't always treat the underlying disease, remember, cure is a four-letter word that we don't use. We have excellent options for complications. And that's why we screen. That's why we look for it. And that's why I'm here. If it was hopeless, don't sit and listen to me. But because we have fantastic ways to deal with the complications, that's why it's important to screen. If we had nothing to do, you could save your time and money. What about the liver and inborn errors of immunity or PI? It's a double whammy. And so I just want to use one example from some of the work we did in CGD or chronic granulomatous disease to illustrate why it's a double whammy. It's about 381 patients. And this was a retrospective study. That means we looked at the charts at the end of the study. We didn't do this before as the patients came in. So there are problems with retrospective studies. You might lose patients, miss patients, their biases, things like that. But this has since been shown in other settings too. The patients with CGD who did not have liver disease are at the top in the dark line. Their survival was close to normal. The patients with liver disease and CGD, that's the survival curve in the dotted line. And reading through those charts was very informative because not once, in not one of the charts, did anyone suspect that any of those patients had liver disease. And it's not just at the NIH where I work. These patients come from all over. So this is University of Arkansas, University of San Francisco. This is Spider Breath, Nebraska. This is everywhere. because the liver disease is silent. It was non-cirrhotic portal hypertension. This curve is not true anymore because now we would manage the liver disease. But this is the impact of a double whammy. That's CGD alone and that's CGD with liver disease before we started to intervene. And no one suspected the liver disease. So, solutions. Get involved, be proactive, it's not hopeless. You're here. The work the Immune Deficiency Foundation does is unbelievable. I started by saying how humbling it is. Get seen in academic centers, get second opinions. Look at what the NIH is doing, look at clinical trials. The government has incredible resources. Embrace and beware of Dr. Google. It's a double-edged sword. And in many ways, this is more than marriage. There's no divorce, right? It's part of you. You can't get rid of it, but it doesn't define you. It really doesn't define you. You can't move on, but you can move forward. And life really does love the liver of it. I'm going to come back to that. So the first thing I said is, you make your regular appointments to your doctor. You know you went through your screening. You know you've got your monitoring. And if your appointment is every 3 months, that's what you do. You go every 3 months, and between that, you make sure you live your life. You build family, friends, healthcare professionals who are open, who will learn with you. And I have to tell you, I've learned the most from my patients, more than any textbook, more than any teacher. You want someone who's available and accessible. You want to build trust. You need the trust because in times of crisis, you need to know you can call. You need a center of excellence. They don't have to be, if you live in Spider-Breath, Nebraska, you're not going to have the world authority on CGD. Steve Holland or Harry Malik or Sergio Rosenzweig is not there. But you need a doctor there who's excellent in the sense of caring and who's excellent in the sense of they're there for you and they'll respond to you and that they can access care elsewhere. And that's what I mean by a two-tiered system of care. So the bottom line, get engaged. There's no fear. We make peace with uncertainty by putting it in boxes. We make check boxes. We see our doctors regularly. We live our lives. Live, right? We find care. We continue education. What you're doing here, we live. Build the team you want and need around you. Look for the cutting edge. Don't get seduced by nonsense. Dr. Google is dangerous. And we live. The point of this slide is to put the word live there 3 times. Because that's really the message. And this is one of my favorite vacation spots. It's Chincoteague, which is an island off the coast of Virginia. And I think it's important, it's to emphasize the point that it really is important to go out and to live. To walk along the river, to spend time with others that matter to us, because that's more than the doctors. The diseases don't define you. Christopher Coe is my partner in crime. David Klein is the phenomenal pathologist who's taught me so much, who we have at the NIH. And Drs. Hufnagel and Liang are my mentors. Thank you all for your attention.
Wonderful. So everyone, I think that's another round of applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Heller. That was wonderful. Very engaging and informative. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate the time and expertise that you dedicated to this session. So we are getting close on time, so we're not going to do a Q&A, but a couple of resources that we wanted to remind everyone of, the first of which is Ask IDF, which would be a great place to submit any questions that you might have about this session. So if you have any questions about PI and hepatology, any other information that you might encounter during the conference, or just like a request for information or any other question for the IDF team, Ask IDF is really where you want to go. We're happy to intervene or provide any information that we can to the community. So really wanted to highlight Ask IDF as a resource for everyone. Additionally, it's great to have everyone here forming connections at the conference, but we also have a lot of other opportunities to form connections with others in the community, which includes our Get Connected groups. I know many of our individuals that are here today are a part of a Get Connected group, but if you're not already, really encourage you to look that up. We have them across the country in many different states and cities, and it's just a really great way to stay in touch with others in the community, as well as stay in touch with IDF and what we're doing as an organization as well. And then lastly, biggest reminder, please, if you have time after this session, complete the survey for this session. It will just be a short few questions that ask, how you felt about the session and the information that was provided. And really want to thank all of you in advance for completing the survey for this session and others throughout the next couple of days. Just because IDF is always working to improve the information that we're providing to the community and make our events as beneficial as possible as we can for everyone who attends. And your feedback is really invaluable to that. So we really look through all of the feedback and the input that individuals like you provide in those surveys. So just want to thank you in advance for doing those. And with that, we will close out. Just want to thank Dr. Heller one more time.